Okay, so let's continue our discussion about rings of functions of varieties. Okay, so let me recall the picture as it was explained in the previous lecture. So on one side we have the that is the geometric side. We have if you want affine varieties, and on the commutative algebraic side we have the so called rings of functions on affine varieties. So let me recall, you see an affine variety is supposed to be a closed irreducible closed subset of some affine space, okay, and affine space is of dimension n is just kn, k cross k cross k n times given the Zariski topology, alright, and by the Zariski topology, of course, if you recall, it is just the topology that declares closed sets to be common zero loci of a bunch of polynomials, okay, in the appropriate number of variables. So here on this side you have closed subsets, irreducible closed subsets of affine space. So standard examples are affine space itself is irreducible. Of course we are always working with K, an algebraically closed field, K is an algebraically closed field, okay. If you take the affine n space, then the ring of functions for affine space is A of an, which is the polynomial ring in n variables over k, okay. So there is this association that takes to every affine variety its ring of functions, okay, and of course the functions we are interested in are polynomial functions, right, and more generally if you give me a closed subset of an affine space which is also irreducible, this is what a general affine variety is. A general affine variety is defined to be an irreducible closed subset of some affine space, and for such an irreducible closed subset, what is the ring of functions? The ring of functions is defined to be the ambient ring of functions, that is the ring of functions of the ambient space, the largest space in which x sits, namely the ring of functions on this, divided by the ideal of that subset, and the ideal of this subset, mind you, is the ideal of functions, namely the ideal polynomials which vanish on all of x, okay, and you know that that is prime because x is irreducible, alright, and therefore this quotient is an integral domain, okay, because you are taking the polynomial ring and you are going modulo prime ideal, okay, basically you are going modulo prime ideal, so the result, the quotient is an integral domain. And you see this closed this irreducible closed subset here shows up as a quotient here. This is a quotient, and this is just you are just going mod the ideal of x, okay, and well, see the point is that what is actually happening is whatever is happening here is on the geometric side is an exact mirror image of what is happening here on the commutative algebraic side, and algebraic geometry derives from this translation basically, okay, so that problems geometric problems can be translated into commutative algebraic problems and vice versa, and a problem that you cannot solve here, maybe you can solve it here and the other way around, okay. So so the first thing I want to tell you is of course on this side it's affine varieties, on this side it's rings of functions on affine varieties, and I am saying that there is some kind of a bijection. So there is also a map that is going on this side about which I mentioned the existence of, but I didn't tell you what it was in the last lecture. I would like to tell you what that is, and that is the so-called max spec. So I will come to that, and these two put together will tell you that whatever is happening here and is exactly a mirror image of what is happening on this side, okay, and so let me recall. See, for example, if you have that x is a geometric hypersurface, that corresponds to on this side x being an a hypersurface in the commutative algebraic sense, okay, and in fact on this side I should not write x, actually I should write something about its ring of functions, and the fact that x is a hypersurface in the commutative algebraic sense is the fact is that x is a hypersurface in the commutative algebraic sense is something that is defined by a single equation. It's a locus defined by a single equation, and so I of x, so the condition is I of x is generated by a single polynomial f, and so x is just the zero locus of a single polynomial, and since I of x is prime, okay, it will force that f has to be an irreducible polynomial, and it has to be irreducible non-constant polynomial, okay. So that is the condition for hypersurface in the commutative algebraic sense, okay, and x being a geometric hypersurface is, what is the geometric meaning of being a hypersurface? The geometric meaning is via dimension. So it means that the dimension of x is actually 1 less than the dimension of the ambient space, the bigger space, so it's n minus 1, okay, where n is the dimension of the larger space, and of course here by dimension I mean the topological dimension, alright, and we saw last time that these two are equivalent, and that was basically an application of both the Krull's Haupt ideal sets and also the important theorem that you know and that a Noetherian integral domain is a UFD, a unique factorization domain if and only if every ideal every prime ideal of height 1 is principal, okay. So so you know for both these theorems we do need that the ring involved is Noetherian, okay. Krull's principal ideal theorem says that if you take a Noetherian ring and you take an element f in the Noetherian ring which is not a unit and it's also not a zero divisor, okay, then every minimal prime ideal that contains this element has height 1, okay, that's Krull's principal ideal theorem, and so the geometric content is that you know while both these theorems I tell you that these two are actually equivalent, okay, and the other beautiful thing is that you can ask the question of when the ring of functions on an affine variety is a unique factorization domain, and the answer to that is that you take any affine variety and look at its ring of functions. The condition that it is a unique factorization domain is equivalent to saying that every geometric hypersurface in that variety, namely every codimension 1 irreducible subset, is defined by a single equation. Okay, that is a geometric translation of the fact that every prime ideal of height 1 is principal. Okay, the prime ideal of height 1 condition tells you that the dimension of your locus goes down by 1. Okay, it has codimension 1, it goes down by 1 from the dimension of the bigger space in which you are considering it. Okay, and so therefore the geometric content is that if you have a unique factorization domain, I mean when are rings of, for which affine varieties are the rings of functions unique factorization domains, they are precisely the affine varieties for which every codimension 1 irreducible subset is defined by the locus of a single equation. That is what that is a geometric content. Okay, so this is one particular example. So I still I want to say a little bit more going from this side to that side. So you see, let me give you two examples. One is let me take the 2 plane. Okay, so the 2 plane, there are many avatars of the 2 plane. So for example, I can take well, I can look at A2. Okay, this is a 2 plane. Okay, and if I look at the corresponding ring of functions, I will get the A of A2k, which is just k if you want x1 x2. Okay, it's a polynomial ring in 2 variables. Then I can also consider 2 plane as, if you want, the xy plane in 3 space. That's also after all the 2 plane, only that you are considering it in a bigger space. So for example, you can take xy plane in A3k. That means you are looking at 3-dimensional space, k cross k cross k. You are calling the coordinates as x y z if you want, and then you are looking at the xy plane. That's also the plane, 2 plane anyway. And if you look at the ring of functions on this, you will get A of well, let me write that, A of xy plane in 3 space. What am I going to get? I am going to get the ring of functions on a irreducible closed subset is defined to be the ring of functions of the ambient space, which in this case is the affine 3 space, so it is A of A3, okay, modulo the ideal of that irreducible subset. Okay, that is the definition. So it goes by model, you have to go modulo the ideal of the xy plane. And if you see what this will give you is, you will get A of A3 is of course k xyz, because we agreed to call the coordinates on this 3 plane as xyz. Okay, and it is the xy plane you are interested in. And what are the functions that vanish on the xy plane? It's the z coordinate, where xy plane is simply written as z equal to 0, and so it's actually the ideal of xy plane. The xy plane is just the ideal generated by z. Okay, and so it's the polynomial ring k xyz modulo z, which is actually isomorphic to kxy. Okay, so and so you see, if you watch, these two are one and the same. Geometrically it's just the 2 plane. Here it is a 2 plane considered as the whole space, and here is a 2 plane considered as the xy plane. Okay, and see what is happening on this side. What you get is these two are isomorphic. You get that the ring of functions are isomorphic. This is also a polynomial ring in 2 variables, that's also a polynomial ring in 2 variables, so they are isomorphic. Okay, so So let me give you one more example. In fact, let me take more generally, you can take some plane, a more general plane in n space. Okay, if you take a 2 plane in an, okay, and if you associate to it the ring of functions a of the 2 plane in n space, okay, what will happen is you will still find that it is still isomorphic to the polynomial ring in 2 variables. It will happen. So what is it that I am trying to say? I am trying to say that geometrically you are looking only at the 2 plane, whether you are looking at the 2 plane completely, the 2 plane itself, or whether it is embedded as a plane in 3 space, or whether it is embedded as a plane in n space. No matter how you look at it, this definition of the affine coordinate ring, the ring of functions on an affine variety, this definition gives you isomorphic rings. It does not give you something different, and the fact that all the 3 cases give you up to isomorphism the same ring is an indication of the fact that you are looking at the same geometric object, you are looking at only the plane. Okay, so the moral of the story is that the ring of functions, okay, it really captures the object that you are looking at. It is not going to change just because it is not going to distinguish between a 2 plane in 3 space or a 2 plane in n space, because a 2 plane is always a 2 plane, there is nothing different geometrically about it, the only thing is the way it is embedded, alright. So the moral of the story is this gives you one rationale as to why you should study rings of functions. The ring of functions is a geometrically it's an intrinsic object when you take an affine variety. Okay, intrinsic means up to isomorphism it depends only on the affine variety, not on where you see it. Okay, so that is one of the justifications of studying rings of functions on affine varieties. So I should now tell you that there is another common name in the literature. People also use the word affine coordinate ring. Okay, so people, instead of saying rings of functions on affine varieties, people just use the word affine coordinate ring. So this is a word that you will often see in the literature. Okay, so the moral of the story is that so you see, so you can expect, what does this isomorphism here correspond to here? What it's telling you is, you should expect that this should be isomorphic to this and this should be isomorphic to this, and this isomorphism as varieties, as affine varieties, is precisely what is getting translated on that side as isomorphisms of their affine coordinate rings. That is what you should expect, and that is exactly what happens. In fact, this association is actually an equivalence. Okay, I will tell you how it is an equivalence, how strong it is. On this side, if you take only isomorphism classes of affine varieties, okay, then on this side you should put isomorphism classes of such rings, affine coordinate rings. Okay, then this is a bijective association, because if you change the affine variety up to isomorphism, then its affine coordinate ring will also change only up to isomorphism. Okay, that is one point. Then the other point is, if anything that happens on this side has a meaning on that side, so a closed subvariety corresponds to a quotient. Okay, suppose I don't take the set of isomorphism classes of affine varieties on this side, and there also I don't take the set of isomorphism classes of affine coordinate rings. Okay, then if you give me a closed subvariety like this closed subvariety will automatically correspond to a quotient. So you see, this closed, something being a closed subset of the irreducible closed subset of another thing, that will, this is called a closed immersion. Okay, the word used is a closed immersion. Some affine variety being thought of as a closed irreducible subset of some other affine variety. Okay, this closed immersion reflects on this side as a quotient. Okay, so quotients here correspond to closed immersions. Okay, it doesn't stop there. Isomorphisms here correspond to isomorphisms there. That's exactly what we saw here. Okay, more, what do open subsets correspond to? Okay, the beautiful answer is open subsets here will also correspond to ring homomorphisms here. In fact, they will be K algebra homomorphisms, and you know what, they will be localizations. So the beautiful thing is closed immersions will correspond to quotients. Open immersions, namely the inclusion of an open inclusion of a variety being sitting inside another bigger variety is an open subset. Okay, and this is something that I will explain soon. Okay, that will show up there as a localization of rings. Okay, so and this is a very beautiful equivalence of categories. So I should only tell you one thing, what are the objects here? So what are so if I say they are just coordinate rings of affine coordinate rings of affine varieties, that means I am giving a definition here which actually depends on this side. But if I want to give a definition only on this side, then the correct definition is these, what you should put on this side is finitely generated K algebras which are integral domains. Okay, so what you should put on this side, okay, so on this side, so let me write that down somewhere here. I am a little short of space, but anyway let me write it. So let me write it here, finitely generated K algebras which are integral domains. So what does this mean? This means they are algebras of this form, K of some polynomial ring, K of y1 etc. ym modulo a P where P is a prime ideal. So let me write it below so that I can modulo P where P is a prime. Okay, and you know how it's going to go from here to here. Okay, don't worry about this max spec for the moment, but you know what, you know the object on this side for which this is the affine coordinate ring, you know what it is. It is actually AM. Okay, whenever you write a quotient, I told you it is the affine coordinate ring of the 0 locus of the denominator, which has to be a prime ideal, considered in the ambient space for which the functions are the numerator. So the numerator here is a polynomial ring in m variables, that is a ring of functions on AM. Okay, and P is a prime ideal there, therefore its 0 locus will be an irreducible closed subset of AM, and that therefore defines an closed subvariety of AM. Okay, m dimensional affine space over K, and each ring of functions will be precisely this. So you know this will correspond, you know, if I draw an arrow like this will correspond to well, let me write it here, it will be some this will correspond to Z of P as an irreducible closed subset of AM. That is what this corresponds to. Okay, so on this side what I am putting is so called finitely generated K algebras which are integral domains, and the definition of that is actually it's simply a polynomial ring in finitely many variables over K modulo a prime ideal. I mean this prime ideal comes because I want the quotient to be an integral domain, so you have to go modulo a prime, and finitely generated is because it should be quotient of a polynomial ring in finitely many variables, because the yi's they generate the polynomial ring in m variables, therefore their images in the quotient, namely the yi bars, okay, the cosets yi plus p which are the yi bars in the quotient ring, they will generate the quotient ring, as an algebra over K, okay. So that's why this is a finitely generated algebra over K, which is an integral domain, and conversely every such algebra is defined to be something like this, okay. So what I am trying to say is we have an equivalence of actually categories, okay. We have an equivalence of categories. On this side you have affine varieties and morphisms between affine varieties, on that side you have these finitely generated K algebras which are integral domains, and the morphisms are K algebra homomorphisms, and it is an equivalence of categories, okay. I will explain all these things soon, but there is one thing I should say at the outset. I have been saying morphisms, I said isomorphisms of varieties, I said morphisms of varieties, so that is something that I have to define. I have to define what is a morphism between one morphism from one variety to another, okay. So that is going to come very soon, but I am saying that this is the general picture in which you get a complete equivalence of categories, and in that sense everything that you see here is actually a mirror image of that, and vice versa, okay. So all this tells you that studying the affine coordinate ring, the ring of functions on an affine variety, is a very important thing because that captures everything, okay. Whether you look at it as coordinate rings of affine varieties, or whether you look at on this side the affine varieties, it is one and the same because of this equivalence. So this is why I am saying all this. I am saying this is why you can say that studying rings of functions on affine varieties is important, and it also kind of it also justifies in a way Felix Klein's statement that the geometry of a space is controlled by the functions on the space, okay. So somehow these functions, they control the geometry. Mind you, we had only affine n space which came from Kn, and all we normally know about Kn is only that it's an n-dimensional vector space over K, but we forgot the vector space structure, and the geometry came in by looking at polynomial functions and using them to define the Zariski topology. So you see even the topology on this side was gotten by functions on that side, you must understand, and the beauty is the functions on this side completely capture the topology, okay. They, in fact, not only the topology, the most deepest statement is that everything, the functions on this side completely capture the geometry on this side. So geometry at the lowest level is the topology, then the next level is more deeper properties like manifold theoretic properties, smoothness, regularity, and things like that, okay. So everything on this side, geometric side, is captured by the commutative algebra, which is the ring of functions, okay. So all this is to tell you why it is so important to study rings of functions, okay. So I will elaborate on all this whatever I said very soon, but now what we will do is I wanted to okay, so let me tell you about this max spec thing. So let me explain this max spec, that is the arrow that goes from this side to that side, alright. So so let me again repeat the following thing. I will show later on that if you have two affine varieties on this side and you have a morphism, that will give rise to a morphism in the reverse direction of their coordinate rings, and conversely if you have two coordinate rings of two affine varieties and you have a K algebra homomorphism, that will give rise to a morphism in the other direction, okay. That this will be a Pakka equivalence, and under this equivalence a closed subset will correspond to a quotient, an open subset will correspond to a localization, okay. This is what will happen. You can see the morphisms are going in the this is an arrow reversing equivalence, because you see from x to an if you have a closed embedding, okay, then you have from the functions on an to functions on x. This is just restriction of functions which is seen as a quotient, okay. So this is what will happen, and if you have u, an affine variety u sitting as an open subset of an, what will happen is from a of an to a of u, you will get a homomorphism which will be actually localization of this ring at a suitable multiplicative subset in the sense of commutative algebra, okay. So everything on this side will translate to something on this side and conversely, okay, but all that needs to be proved. We are going to prove it, okay, but I am just telling this to you at the outset to tell you that why it is so important to study rings of functions on affine varieties, okay, which are of this form, finitely generated K algebras which are integral domains. Now I will go one step further. What I am trying to do is to go one step further and say that suppose I forget the picture on this side, suppose I completely forget affine space, I forget the points on affine space, I completely forget everything. Suppose I had only the functions, suppose I had, then from the functions I can get back my space, okay. That is what this arrow from this direction to that direction is all about. That is, just from the functions I can cook up the space. That means the whole space is already here in the functions, okay, and that's a much stronger proof of the veracity of the statement of Felix Klein, that the geometry of the space is not only, so you know what he said is geometry of a space is controlled by the functions on the space, but more seriously, if you give me the functions, then I can give you the space. I can cook up the space from the space of function, from the, if I know the functions on a space, then I know the space. I can construct the space from its functions, okay. It's a very, very deep thing. So that's what this max spec does, and that's what I want to explain. So what I'll do is I'll start with something that you must have seen in a course in commutative algebra, but nevertheless it's not very difficult to recall these things. So you know, you start with R, a commutative ring with 1, so what you do is you look at spec R. This is called the spectrum of R. In fact it is called, sometimes it's also called the prime, more explicitly as the prime spectrum of R, and this is supposed to be the set of all prime ideals in R, okay. So what you do is you look at the set of prime ideals of R, okay, and regard each prime ideal not as a prime ideal, regard it as a point. So this square bracket script P is supposed to tell you that you think of, here you are thinking of the prime ideal P as a point in spec R. When you think of it as a point in spec R, you are not thinking of it as a prime ideal inside R, you are thinking of it as a point on a space, okay. So the spectrum is just the points which correspond to prime ideals, okay, and then so you should not confuse this with equivalence class, because normally you know you put a square bracket around an element to say that it is the equivalence class of that element, so you should not confuse it with that. There is no equivalence class, it is just to distinguish between the prime ideal as a subset of R and the prime ideal as a point of spec R, they are different, okay. So my space is spec R. Now the spec R will become a topological space, okay. How? So there is a Zariski topology on this, just like you have a Zariski topology on affine space, you have a Zariski topology on spec R, and in fact you can say both ways, this is inspired by that and that is also inspired by this, okay. It depends on where you start, okay, they are equally one the same. So so let me define this. Zariski topology on spec R is given by taking sets of the form Z of I, okay. So defined to be equal to the set of all P in spec R such that P contains I, where I in R is an ideal, to be closed sets, okay. So you see the Zariski topology is defined like this. The Zariski topology is defined as the it's defined by specifying a collection of closed sets. And what are the closed sets? The closed sets correspond, they come out of ideals of R. You take an ideal I of R, immediately you can write down the closed set Z of I, okay, which you should think of as a 0 set of I, okay, if you compare with the Zariski topology on the affine space. And the 0 set of I is all those prime ideals, it's all those points which correspond to the, for which the corresponding prime ideals contain I, okay. This is the way it is defined, and you can check that this satisfies the conditions for a topology, namely sets of this form satisfy the axioms for closed sets in a topology, and you get, thus spec R becomes a topological space. Okay, and then you see you can also check that, you know, if you have if you give me given a ring homomorphism f from R1 to R2. Okay, so R1 and R2 are commutative rings with 1, and f is a ring homomorphism from R1 and R2, then the map spec f going from spec R2 to spec R1, which is given by, give me a prime ideal of R2 and simply send it to its inverse image, which is a prime ideal of R1. Okay, if you give me a ring homomorphism from R1 to R2, then it induces a map in the reverse direction on the spectra, on the prime spectra, and that is simply given by pulling back prime ideals, because you know the inverse image of prime ideal and a ring homomorphism is again a prime ideal. It is not true for maximal ideals, but it is true for prime ideals. Inverse image of maximal ideal need not be maximal, but inverse image of a prime ideal is always a prime ideal. Okay, so what will happen is, well, the fact is you get this map, that is not the point. The point is this is now a map of topological spaces. See, it is a map between two topological spaces. The most obvious thing we can expect is that it should be continuous, and it is. Okay, so this map is continuous. So this is another fact that you should have come across in a course in commutative algebra. If you have not, you can, it's very easy to check. Okay, and in fact what happens is, if you look at so let me maybe I will put a star here, I will put another star here, then here is, so it is like a bulleted list. So but instead of bullets I am using stars. So here the third thing I want to say is that what about a closed subset like this? Okay, what about a closed subset like this? So the so what I want to say is that z of I, so if you take consider R to R mod I, the canonical, so I am writing CAN for the canonical quotient map from R to R mod I. Okay, then if you look at spec of that, which goes from spec R mod I to spec R, okay, because you know I have already told you, if you have a ring homomorphism from one ring to the other, you are going to get a map on the spectra in the reverse direction. In particular, you take the ring homomorphism to be the canonical ring homomorphism that you get from a ring to its quotient. Then the corresponding map on spectra, what will it be? This will actually identify spec R mod I with the closed subset Z of I in spec R. So what will happen, identifies spec R mod I with Z of I. So mind you, Z of I is a subset of spec R. By definition it is a closed subset of spec R because of the Zariski topology I have defined on spec R. And spec R mod I, the image of spec R mod I under this is identified with that. Okay, so in other words, Z of I is also spectrum of a ring. The moral of the story is that the subset, closed subset Z of I also is a spectrum. So every we define a closed subset inside a spectrum, and it turns out that every closed subset itself is a spectrum, can be identified with a spectrum. What is a spectrum? It is a spectrum of the quotient by that ideal. okay. And in some sense, you know, you must think of it like this, you must think like this, if R is thought as the ring of functions on spec R, okay, abstractly, then R mod I is a ring of functions on Z of I, which is identified with spec R mod I, okay. So you see, R is a ring of functions on spec R, alright. Functions in what sense is something that has to be made formal, more precise, but don't worry about it. R is a ring of functions on spec R. Then what is the ring of functions on Zi? It's R mod I, okay, because spec of R mod I can be identified with Z of I, okay. And there's one more thing, you see, what is the situation with respect to localization? So two particular kinds of ring homomorphisms are quotients and localizations, okay. And so what happens with localization? Consider R to S inverse R L, which is a localization of R with respect to a multiplicative subset S inside R. So if you remember, in commutative algebra, given a ring R, we define what is meant by a multiplicative subset. A multiplicative subset is a subset which doesn't contain 0 and which is closed under multiplication. So if there are two elements in that set, then their product is also in that set, okay. And we can, in commutative algebra, form the localization of R with respect to the multiplicative subsets, which is just inverting the elements of the multiplicative subset. So S inverse R, which is the localization of localization by the multiplicative subset, sometimes it is also written as R bracket S inverse, okay. So it can be thought of as a polynomial, it can be thought of as polynomial ring in R in as many variables given by reciprocals of elements of S modulo the natural relations that come because of the elements of S being inside R, okay. And that is the reason why one writes S inverse R as R square bracket S inverse, but essentially it means that you are just inverting S. So you know, the simplest case is if you take R to be, for example, if you take R to be integers and you take S to be the complement of 0, okay, then S inverse R will just be rational numbers. More generally, if you take if R is an integral domain and S is the complement of 0, which is a prime ideal, okay, the complement of a prime ideal is always a multiplicative subset, and localization by that is always going to give you a localization. And in this case, complement of 0, if you localize the integral domain at 0, at the complement of 0, then you are going to invert, that means you are inverting everything outside which is different from 0, and that means you are forming the field of fractions. So forming the field of fractions is a very special case of localization. Localization is a generalization of that. You would have seen this in commutative algebra, but the fact is that if you take this localization map, okay, then what does it correspond to in the spectrum, at the level of the spectrum? Then spec L will go from spec S inverse R to spec R, okay. You will get this map. Let me take a particular case. Put, for example, S to be just the multiplicative subset given by a single element R squared, where R is in R is not nilpotent, okay. I want R to be the element R in R, small r in capital R, to be nilpotent, because I don't want some power of it to be 0. If some power of it is 0, then the multiplicative set contains 0, and I don't want 0 in the multiplicative set. There are some books which say that 0 is allowed in the multiplicative set, but then the convention is that the localization becomes a 0 ring, and nobody wants to study the 0 ring for as far as geometry is concerned. So we always never want 0 to come inside the multiplicative set. That is the reason why I don't want small r to be nilpotent, okay. And then in that case we normally write S inverse R as R localized at small r, okay. We also write it as R bracket small r inverse, some people write as r of 1 by r, okay, these are various notations, okay. And the fact is spec of if you calculate spec of RR, what you will get is you will simply get all those prime ideals, the points corresponding to prime ideals, such that the prime ideal does not contain small r, okay. And this so you will get this identification, okay, and this is just complement of z of r in spec r. So you see spec r has a Zariski topology as I have explained, and then there is the ideal generated by small r, okay, it is ideal generated by a single element r, and you take the 0 set of that ideal. What is the 0 set of that ideal? By definition it is all those prime ideals which contain the ideal r, but a prime ideal contains the ideal generated by r if and only if it contains r itself. So this is z of r precisely has for its points those prime ideals which contain small r, and what is the complement? It is all those prime ideals which do not contain points corresponding to prime ideals which do not contain small r, and that is precisely spec RR, capital R sub small r. And how do you get this identification? This identification is provided by this map. The image of this map, the image of spec L in this case, identifies spec of S inverse R with this subset, which is an open subset of spec R, okay, because it is a complement of a closed set. So the moral of the story is, you know, the ring of functions on the complement of the locus defined by a single element, okay, namely the ring of functions on the locus where a single element does not vanish, is precisely localization by that element, okay, which is if you think of small r, you know, if you think of small r as an element of capital R, and if you think of R as the ring of functions on spec R, then small r is a particular function, and what is z of r? You should think of z of r as the locus where r small r vanishes, okay, and what is its complement? Its complement should be the locus where small r does not vanish but where small r does not vanish, if small r is a function that does not vanish, 1 by small r should also be a valid function. So in other words it tells you that in this locus where small r does not vanish, which is an open set, the functions are simply given by r of 1 by small r, namely the functions are of the form some function of some element of r divided by some power of small r, which is intuitively correct, and in fact you get it here, okay. So this identification is via L in this case. So the moral of the story is the ring of functions corresponding to a closed subset is given by given by an ideal is given by the quotient ring, and the ring of functions corresponding to an open subset, a so called basic open subset where a function does not vanish, is simply given by inverting that function. That is what it says, okay. So this is the background from commutative algebra, okay, and we can use this to go from this side of the diagram to the other side of the diagram, which I'll continue with this in the next lecture, okay.